It's one day to Election Day, less than 24 hours in what's shaping up to be a very tight race. Affordable housing remains a top issue for voters. A recent Pew Research Center survey found 69% of Americans were, quote, very concerned about the cost of housing. That's up from 64% in January. And we're taking a look at both candidates' proposals to deal with housing and whether either could actually address the problem. Joining us now, we've got Pierre Debbas, who is the managing partner at Romer Debbas, one of Manhattan's leading real estate law firms. Great to have you here with us in studio.
Thank you. Thanks for having me today.
Absolutely. Let's talk about this a little more. I mean, one of the major things that we're tracking is the plans from either candidate here. And where either of them could make a dent in housing affordability. What are your anticipations?
You know, I think that this is one of the most important topics going into the election. And when you look at both candidates' proposals, start with candidate Kamala Harris. She is proposing a $25,000 down payment assistance for those below a certain income threshold. And I think that the intention of this is an excellent intention. My fear is that the additional liquidity in cash will just increase pricing further. So it's not just merely okay, we need to, issue more stimulus or, more government-assisted funds to help people buy. It's more so, how do we create more housing stock? So part of her proposal that I actually really like is that she's coming up with tax incentives to incentivize developers to develop housing for those, in the primary resident average medium home price of like $420-something thousand in the country. That's an excellent sentiment. That's something that I think we need to, hammer home, and I think something that should have been done yesterday. Now, flip the script to President Trump's proposal. President Trump's proposal predominantly has been talking about freeing up federally owned land to help developers have, access to cheap land to create more housing. And good, again, well-intentioned, but doesn't move the needle. How much federally owned land can we give? We're roughly 5 million homes short of current demand levels, right? So I don't know how much federally land you're going to give up to meet that, but it's not going to be enough. On the positive note, interest rates is part of the massive problem in our market. So if you look at the last 4.5, 5 years since the pandemic, you've had prices appreciate well over 50%. Now, in the last 2 years in particular, interest rates went from 2.5, 2.7% range to 7%. So, it's a two-pronged problem. How do we create more stock? And how do we address the affordability by bringing rates down? So which candidate will be more aggressive with the Fed in helping rates come down? So far at the moment, it seems like President Trump's been more of a vocal critic in terms of the Fed policies.
Yeah.
So, I think both come to the table with something positive, but neither's coming up with the proper solution.
It's interesting because it's also going to come to some of those down ballot votes that are cast as well, because that is going to be what eventually moves the needle on turning campaign talk into actual sustainable results here as well for potential home buyers. As you think about the market right now, and especially for the new home buyers that are waiting, and I think we have, some of the stats here just around what that behavior is looking like. How do you anticipate new home buyers are going to be the critical piece of what the housing market looks like over these next few years?
My fear is that the barrier to entry is going to be way too high for them. And my biggest fear is that this generation will not be able to afford a home. And home ownership is largely the predominant wealth driver for your average American, right? They don't really have many other assets than that. You pay off your mortgage over the course of years with amortization. All of a sudden, 20 years down the road, you have a seven-figure asset or close to it that's free and clear. Now, what I think really needs to happen, we need to regulate Wall Street's involvement in the housing market, their investment in acquiring hundreds of thousands of homes. It's funny when you talk about the election tomorrow, that's one of the few things both Republicans and Democrats agree upon. There's a bill proposed in the House and the Senate that hasn't been pushed far enough. The bill was proposed about a year ago that would limit Wall Street to only owning about 50 homes, and anything more that they would have to sell. I think that has to be passed immediately, and then that would provide additional supply in the housing market. It will also reduce competition in the future, and any incentive that you give developers to develop, I'm actually a huge advocate as a real estate lawyer for having restrictions on the deeds that limit the transferability to only primary occupants. So I always say, if you buy a second home or you buy, an investment property, we don't really care about that segment of the market right now, right? Because the situation's so dire for your average American that we need to focus in terms of how to reduce the barrier to entry and let them have the American dream of home ownership.
What type of incentives would you like to see for home builders as well? I mean, you're clearly evaluating everything from the existing homes the way out to the land that is available to build on. And for a lot of the new home builders, they're trying to figure out, okay, where are the new plots of land that we need to go purchase to be able to build on top of and ultimately close that supply, the lack of supply, I should say, that we have right now.
It's an excellent point, because when you look at inflation and the cost of building has gone up so significantly that in a theoretical world, what I'm saying is great, but we also have to make it profitable for developers to incentivize them to do it. So the way, in my opinion, to do that is through tax breaks. They pay capital gains tax or income tax. If you were to build a certain number of homes in a zoned area, like I had a theory that we had opportunity zones came up years ago. Why not create a program similar to opportunity zones where you look at areas where there's a significant shortage of supply? If developers develop, say, 10 homes that are limited to the medium home price in that area, maybe half of their tax bills waived. Gains tax is cut by half, income tax is cut by half. That way, they're getting enough profit where it incentivizes them to do it, and we solve a problem of creating supply for those who need it.
Interesting. Pierre Debbas, who is the managing partner at Romer Debbas. Thanks so much for taking the time here with us.